Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock-flavoured podcast. On this show, we're talking about role-playing games again, but perhaps without a particularly specific Moorcockian angle. More from the perspective of, well, are role-playing games great? It probably requires some explanation and setup. It could easily be argued, and I've seen it said, that Breakfast in the Ruins is an RPG-adjacent podcast. After all, when we think about the big beast of role-playing games, Moorcock is quite clearly acknowledged as a key influence. And of course, we've talked on previous episodes about the existence of the Stormbringer role-playing game, and at some point we might delve a little deeper into the Hawkmoon and Corum games too, let alone the latest French Elric game coming in the next year or so from the creators of the new Elric board game, Elric Rise of the Young Kingdoms, which is a wee bit overdue, but such is the nature of Kickstarters. The Quickstarter version of the translated Elric RPG has been sent to backers as a PDF though, and it looks pretty good. Anyway, back to this episode. One of the joys of gaming is that so many of the other folks that enjoy it are similarly passionate about genre fiction of all stripes, with games covering a vast range of subject matters. And, from time to time, a lot of these folks like to get together in a nice spot, indulge their passions, maybe have a few beers along the way, and catch up with people that they may have played online games with or chatted to on social media for years, maybe even put themselves out there and volunteer to run games for other people that may or may not have met, including people you'll have heard on here, like Clarky, aka Kihar, and Ian Stead, aka Biomass Art. One of the interesting things about these events is you bump into people and it takes you a while to realise that you've interacted with them, possibly for years, via their social media handles, and when the penny drops, it's usually very rewarding, particularly over a few beers. One such of these types of events is GROGMEET, the annual gaming gathering instigated and facilitated by Chris Hart, aka Dirk the Dice, who you'll also have heard on this podcast when we talked about Letters from Hollywood last year, or was it the year before? I can't remember. And before that, Wizardry and Wild Romance. I've attended GROGMEET once before, back in maybe 2018 perhaps, but before lockdown anyway, and since then it's always clashed with another of our annual nerdy pastimes, Thought Bubble, the UK Comic Art Festival. But, due to a rescheduling, the clash did not occur this time, and just a couple of weeks ago, I decamped to Manchester for the weekend, and this time, I took Phil along. We gamed, we supped plenty of grog, and in both respects it truly was a delightful GROGMEET, and we had an all-round great time. So, we decided to record our pre- and post-match thoughts for posterity, and, as a bonus, I bumped into Andrew Beck at my first game, one of those face-to-face meetings after some years of online interaction, and it turns out he was running a Stormbringer game at GROGMEET, so I roped him in for a conversation too. So prepare some snacks, get your dice together, sit back and join us as we nerd out a bit about the pleasures of gaming and just why it's such a rewarding pastime for old grogs, and, in the case of Phil, comparatively new ones too. Well, here we are, baby. We're in Whitworth Lock in our apartment in Manchester.
I know, quite a good journey over as well today.
All right, wasn't it? But what are we doing here? Well, we're over here for GROGMEET, aren't we?
I know, gaming weekend.
Gaming weekend, although we are we're not spitting, we're skipping the Friday night session.
Yeah.
In favour of going out boozing with the lads.
Well, we've got to catch up with the lads if we're in his manor.
That is very true. Also, it's your first ever gaming con. I know Dirk says that it's not a con, it's just a like-minded meet-up of gaming people. But, you know, it's like a mini. I say mini, it's not that mini anymore, it's quite large.
Absolutely, and there's we passed the window and there's lots of tables down there.
Yeah,
in full swing.
They were seeing our sexy legs walking past the window if they'd have looked up, wouldn't they? But yeah, here we are. So we're going out boozing with Loz tonight, but tomorrow is your first ever gaming con. Well, no, it's actually technically it's not, is it? Because really, Clarky Con.
Well, yes.
Was a mini con, wasn't it? For our friend Clarky the Cruel's 50th birthday party in a pub on the Wirral.
Yeah, that was really good fun.
Yeah. Technically, it's not your first con. But this, I suppose, we had the pleasure on that occasion. We had some very nice people at our table, including Kath, who I knew already, although it was the first time I'd ever met her in person. But I've gamed with her numerous times on a Thursday evening. Mm-hmm. We had Glenn at the table, who of course is one of our patrons, so it was lovely to meet Glenn in person, and Glenn looked after you, didn't he?
He did look after me.
Yeah.
Very lovely people.
Yeah, so we played Troika, and that was a really nice game. And tomorrow, you've signed up to 2 games, which would have been with complete strangers, which I think would have been a little bit, might have given you some pause and some level of anxiety. But actually, Kath is playing in your first game.
She is.
You've met Kath already. And Dave and Vicky, who I've gamed with on Thursday nights, and Dave's also a patron of the podcast, who's even appeared on the podcast, of course, talking about his play and talking about the Hammer and Helena. So you're playing with them tomorrow afternoon, and then you're playing with a complete group of strangers.
Yeah.
In the afternoon. So have you remembered what you're playing? I say remembered. Have you logged into Warhorn so you can see what you're playing?
So in the morning, I'm playing Night of Blood.
Ooh.
It's Morkborg, as you say.
Yeah.
Destitute, famished, and soaked to the marrow, our heroes stumble aimlessly through the Drakwold forest. A storm rages overhead. Torrential rain has turned the road into a bog, and intermittent streaks of lightning illuminate worrying movement in the trees. When suddenly a flash lights up a building in the distance, tired eyes recognise a tavern. What blessed luck! With thoughts turning to warm half an ale, they trudge on with renewed vigour, revelling at their change in fortune. An opportunity to enjoy a classic WFRP adventure with the easy brutality of Morkborg.
Holy moly. Now, I know you haven't played Morkborg, but I have, and it's a lot of fun, and it's very, very simple, so you'll be fine with that.
Do you know my first thought when reading about trudging through rain? What I put in 101 last week.
Oh, yeah.
Movies where it's just raining.
You know what? I really hope, just to rub your nose in it, that Morkborg game you play tomorrow is just like Hard to Be a God. I really do.
That's so cruel.
I know. So while you're playing that, I'm playing our pal Ian's game, The Keep, The Return. So, in an alternate world, the 1983 movie The Keep is a big hit and spawns a sequel. This adventure is based on that fictional movie, borrowing inspiration from Operation Paperclip and The Monument Men. It is 1944. The Germans are retreating and the war is in its closing stages. All across Europe, Allied forces are advancing. Deep in the Carpathian Mountains is an ancient fortress that overlooks the Dainu Pass and has a small garrison defending it. This is a hastily put together operation. You need to get to the keep, complete the mission, and get out before the Russians get there. Your mission is twofold. Firstly, retrieve any artifacts or treasures that have been stolen by the Germans and stored there. 2, you are to capture a German scientist called Dr. Klaus Augenstein, who is believed to be in that keep. A renowned geneticist, it is believed that he was developing a project called Operation Endspiel. However, Allied forces had overrun his laboratory complex. He managed to escape and has ended up sheltering in the keep. It is possible surviving German units may be on the way to retrieve him. What that project is, Allied intelligence has been unable to find out.
You know it's not going to end well, don't you?
Not going to end well, that one, is it? But it should be a lot of fun, because I enjoy playing these games. What have you got in the afternoon?
In the afternoon, I've got the Haunted Bordello, and that's a D&D game. It's an advanced D&D.
Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, don't worry. AD&D, all AD&D means is early 80s D&D.
Okay, so you've heard the legends whispered at the bar of the Bloody Toad Inn. You've heard the wailing cries come echoing from out of the deep woodland that is shunned by so many. You know there lay a ruin betwixt those trees, forlorn and old Bordello, they say, a place that was host to some devilish cult. You've heard, too, of the riches that were left behind after the place was burned to the ground well over 100 years ago. It's time to don your chainmail and heft up your broadsword, for this place is ripe for the plundering. Come and playtest a classic Gygaxian adventure location designed for advanced D&D levels 1 to 3. Saving throws will be failed, hit points will be lost, but you can best the odds and plunder the Haunted Bordello. This is a fantasy adventure gaming.
That sounds good fun. So Gary Gygax was one of the guys who invented D&D.
Right.
So there was a couple of other guys as well.
Yeah.
But we won't get into a blinking, bourgeoisie, boring description of D&D history, but D&D Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is the Dungeons and Dragons I started with. So there were various versions of what is now called basic D&D in the 70s. And it was around in the early 80s as well, but for whatever reason, the nerds who invited me to play D&D with them when I was 11 or 12 years old were already using Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. If you actually look at the manuals for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and you read them cover to cover, it's beyond complicated, it's ridiculous, and most of it doesn't make sense. But most people only use the bare bones stripped back version of it, which is your 6 stats, your armor class, your hit points, your equipment, spell lists if you're a spellcaster, and not a great deal more than that. And then there was second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons that introduced things like proficiencies. Actually, don't at me, you fucking D&D nerds. Obviously, that was introduced in Unearthed Arcana and other supplements for the original D&D, like the Wilderness Survival Guide and the Dungeoneer Survival Guide. I know, you don't have to tell me. But it was all formalised in the core book with second edition, which I never did play, but I know Yaki did quite a lot.
All right.
Yeah, Yaki and his mates I've told you before, Yaki and his mates, we'd be around Louis Street on a Friday night, all getting hammered, and Yaki's his mates would be upstairs taking acid and playing Dungeons and Dragons. They played an entire campaign and they were always on acid when they did it. All we could see was howls of laughter and wailing, and things were obviously going wrong, while we sat downstairs with a crap black and white telly that only worked if you hit it every 30 minutes, and a record player with like 4 records, one of which was Val Doonican.
Nice.
Great days.
So what's your second?
My afternoon game is, it's Delta Green, which is a variant of Call of Cthulhu, which I think was heavily inspired in some ways probably by the X-Files, but from memory it's really hard to remember whether the very first Delta Green version, which was in a magazine called The Unspeakable Earth, probably issue 4 maybe from memory, or 3, whether it actually predates the X-Files just or not. But anyway, it's FBI type game versus the Cthulhu mythos. Well, it's not necessarily the FBI. But I think from memory, the first ever scenario for it was called Convergence. I think you were FBI agents, which funnily enough was, I think, the first game I ever ran for Loz, Neil and Robbo. Although Loz's memory says it was a game of Twilight 2000. He might be right, but that was a failure because they went into it. But I ran Convergence for them and it was a lot of fun. And they all died at the end. So I'm playing Delta Green, and the game is called Black Sat. It's written and GM'd by Steph, 1885, who I don't think I've ever come across, but it'll be nice to meet him. And it's the description is: the NASA space shuttle program is coming to an end, and you have been training for a long time, hoping to get a shot at actually flying the damn thing before it gets retired. Now you have your shot. You've been handpicked for a mission to fix a satellite. It's not much, and it's secret, but at least you'll get to put your training into use. You're going to have to babysit 2 experts on the trip who are going to conduct the repairs. What could go wrong? Contains vacuum of space, horror, mind bending, all the good stuff. So that's tomorrow afternoon. I'm looking forward to that. And we've both decided to skip the evening session, haven't we? In favour of going out for booze and food.
And a meal.
Yeah. And, I have done this. I've done the online GROGMEETs before, and I've done GROGMEET in person once before. And again, on that occasion, I stuck to 2 games, because I think 2 games in a day is enough for me. I don't think I'm hardcore enough to do 3 on the bounce.
Are they the same length of time? Because my second one's 3.5 hours. Yeah,
so the morning session is 10:30 till 1:30. That's my morning session. So the afternoon session is the keep. And so I got them the wrong way around. And the afternoon session is 3 till 6:30.
It's exactly the same.
So we get 90 minutes for lunch, for a break, to go and have a pint and get some tucker.
Yeah, I think a third one would probably just tire us out.
Yeah,
so that thought.
I'm a bit so ill. I'm so tired. Yeah. You're right, though. I think 3 on the bounce is probably a touch too far for me. But, it is an interesting thing, this whole gaming business. I've been doing it since I was, I think I was 11 or 12 when I was first invited to play Advanced Dungeons and Dragons by some kids at school who had one of them had an older brother, and that's how we got involved in it. I think that happens for a lot of people. But of course, from your perspective, I mean, we say you're a recent convert to role-playing games, but actually when we think it's probably going on 10 years now, isn't it? Time's
in my
flown by so
40s,
fast.
yeah.
Yeah, time has flown by so quickly.
Not an 11-year-old.
No, but it used to be the case that me and Loz would go over to Hull and would game Stu and Sarah's, or people would come over to us, including Stu and Sarah and Yaki, and would game at the table in the kitchen, and you would go in front room and watch movies.
Or I'd go and see my mum.
Or you'd go and see your mum. And then, when was the first time we actually convinced you, and how did we convince you to join us?
I think it was after you'd had that really disastrous one with the absinthe.
Oh.
And I think it was more when I don't know how we got into my character. I think you told me that. I think it was just through discussion, really.
Yeah, so from memory, the game you're referring to was the end of one of Loz's campaigns, which was Loz views as an abject failure. I think we've actually discussed this on a couple of times when we've done RPG episodes, but Loz considers it an abject failure, but we all remember it with great fondness because it was just so funny. But yeah, it was... we can blame the absinthe and chartreuse, but I'm not going to let Loz get away with that. The absinthe and chartreuse certainly contributed to this terribly disastrous ending to a very, very long campaign that we probably played on and off for 2 years. But hey, this is just sometimes what happens, isn't it? So the first game that you ever played with us, what was it?
I can't remember the title, but my character was a German... Was she a climber? Emily?
She was a German countess, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Who was a pioneering mountaineer.
Yeah, like her father and brother.
Amelie von Gottschalk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this is where things start to get confusing. Because we've had the conversation before that you started playing after the disastrous absinthe game. But the disastrous absinthe game, the way I remember it, was when Loz had taken that campaign back over, and when you played Amelie von Gottschalk, that was the middle section of the campaign that I ran. And then Loz took it back over again. Because who were the other players in that when you played Amelie von Gottschalk?
There was Stu and Sarah and Yaki.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, you didn't play that game. Do you know, it's really confusing, isn't it? Because I don't think we ever played Hawkmoon again after that point. We're going to have to talk to Loz about this in the pub tonight out and try and straighten this timeline out. Because I'm pretty sure that was the ultimate finale of that whole car crash of that end of the campaign. Anyway, we won't go into this in detail because people get really bored listening to it.
Yeah.
So we played that game for a while, and then you became a gamer.
Yeah, I was always present after that.
I don't think you've barely missed a game since then.
No.
So of all the games that we've played, which ones were your favourites? That's probably an unfair question because you're bound to say my games, obviously. Yeah. But I tell you what, different question then. We've played many games. We've played Tales from the Loop. We've played D&D 5th edition. We've played the German Poets game. Did you play that? Of course you did.
Yeah.
You're Friedrich von Gabler. What is it about you and German characters? That was using the Barbarians of Lemuria system that had hacked a little bit. What else? We've played lots of one-offs. We've played Star Wars. The West End Games Star Wars.
Did Tales of the Loop.
Tales from the Loop, yeah. That was, again, another one-off and that we never went back to. So, as somebody who came to gaming relatively late, for our listeners who don't play games, or role-playing games, certainly, what do you enjoy about it?
I enjoy creating the character. And we've done both, where you create the character or you're given a character, and it's much more satisfying when you create them. And because it's become something that it's like writing a book almost. It feels like you're creating them, so all the backstory, the history, that's something you make up to fit into the game.
Yeah. And
I like the fact that you are very different people. Men, women, dragon-born sorcerers.
Yeah.
Whatever. Children. For Tales of the Loop, we were children, weren't we?
That's right.
I really like that. So I was a good child, and I felt I was wanting to be naughty.
Yeah.
So it's just getting lost in that illusion.
Yeah.
It was good fun.
Yeah.
It is good fun. I enjoyed the Star Wars. That was really good fun as well. So doing different games is always keeps it fresh as well.
Yeah, it's a social thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously we play these games, but inevitably, because we live in different cities, to everybody who comes to play at the table with us. So, who are our current crop of players? There's my cousin Emily and her other half Yestin, and they come from Hull, which is an hour and a half away.
And my nephew.
Well, yeah, most recently your nephew Joe, he's coming over from Hull. He's played his first ever game.
Yeah.
Because he drunkenly told us that he was D&D curious one night when he came over to Bradford when we were at a cocktail bar. Of course, there's our friend Gemma who is in Bradford, but she's like an on and off player. She plays occasionally. Loz, of course, when he does play, he comes over from Manchester.
Yeah.
Who else is there? Yaki don't play anymore. Stu and Sarah don't play anymore. I think maybe we cured them of gaming. But inevitably, when we see people, it's like, right, shall we just socialise and have a drink, or shall we game? And inevitably, we always say, well, let's do both.
The only sad thing about it, and I feel it for you and Lars, is you write these games, and inevitably, we never get it. It's not inevitably, but generally, we never get it finished off in one, and then there's such a long lag between the next one. People forget everything. We have to go back to the beginning.
We can't run campaigns, can we?
No.
So everybody forgets everything.
And it's really hard, because if you think of the last game we played with Joe and Emily and Yestin, how little progress we made.
Yeah. But you know what? That is why I don't invest too much effort into complex plots, which is why I just try and put together scenarios that will have some colour and some stupidity and maybe some action, even though I think the last game we played for about 5 hours, was there even a fight?
There was the ones who wanted food.
Oh yeah, that turned out to be urchins. Yeah. So
that was the closest we got.
You avoided getting into a fight and murdering children, which was good. And there was a dance off.
Oh
yeah. But apart from that, we played We played we played a version of D&D called Let's Play Fucking D&D, which is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. It condenses D&D to 6 pages and condenses all the rules, gets rid of everything extraneous, and even then, those 6 pages, 2 of them are for the GM and 2 of them are spell lists. So for the players, it condenses the rules and character generation to 2 pages, which I think is great. So we just used that, and it was good fun.
It was.
And the good thing about that is we're managing to get another game in the calendar within about 2.5 or 3 months of that one, and because it was largely just flavour and a bit of daftness, although at the end you did decide that you were going to go and try and evict King Crab from the frozen ruins of the Fate is a Cruel Tony, the pirate ship, crewed entirely by men called Tony.
Tony, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I think we'll be fine picking that one up, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think when we get together with Gemma, Joe, Emily and Yestin, we can decide again if we're going to carry on with said venture or if we've had a
absolutely
change of heart.
I've got a little kind of sandbox kind of setting for Raven Sarod together, which means that if you decide that you're not yet going to go and tackle King Crab, you don't have to. You can do something else instead.
Absolutely.
If anybody can actually remember what the entire point of it was in the first place, can you?
No.
It was finding out what happened to Babs Copperpot, of course.
Okay.
What happened to Babs Copperpot?
Yeah, well, you're having a dance-off in the middle. You kind of forget your objective. Oh. It went a little bit out there, didn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I suppose so. But we'll get back to it, and I'll give everybody a light summary of what's going on. Even if I've probably forgotten some things that happened. Can't quite remember how the dance-off came about.
No, never can I. But it was good fun with friends and family.
Absolutely. So I've just pulled up the first character you ever created, which was for the German Poets game, which was Frederick von Gabler. So, your German Poets character. So I created this game set in an alternate version of Germany in 1795, 2 years after a comet or a star had fallen and Europe was in the middle of like a new dark age. essentially. And you were all poets in the town of Svashlisbrunn, and poetry and other art had been outlawed by the local bishop, Joseph I. Nevertheless, you were all like rebellious poets, and the game kicked off. It was poetry night at the Moon and Fennec. If you remember that.
Yeah.
And you all had to come up with your characters. I'm not always big on asking people to create characters and come up with copious backstories and details. But everybody did for that, and everybody came up with really interesting backstories. And I've got yours here that you wrote from scratch for your character, which proves that you actually have something of a talent for character development and coming up with something interesting. So it's Frederick von Gabler. Born in 1774 in the city of Eisenach, north of Frankfurt, Freddie has wandered around aimlessly since finishing his education. He played instruments since a young age and left home to join a travelling band. They parted ways after a year due to artistic differences, and Hans wanted to roger him frequently. He moved from village to village, acquainting with the local Fräuleins, busking for money for food and drink and a roof over his head. Often the ladies would put him up, but he moved on when he got bored and when they stopped giving him money, or when he was frequently run out of town by angry fathers and or husbands, often with his skin barely intact. In 1792 he joined the Prussian army as they offered more money than he was making. As the French Revolution sparked a new war between France and several of its neighbours, including Prussia and Austria, he marched on Paris with the Duke of Brunswick, an army that was smashed by the French at the Battle of Valmy. On the eve of the battle, the star fell in the east, and the following day the blood of the dead and the dying turned black as it mingled with the blood churned by boots and the black rain that fell throughout the day. It was a bloody affair, but Freddie fled the field with his life, disillusioned and sickened. He tried to pick up where he left off, but life had changed, and he had changed. He started writing poetry and added it to his repertoire, busking and performing, whether on stage or on the street. However, the ongoing censure of the arts ensured it became tougher than before to make enough marks for beer and food. I remember reading that and going, newcomer to games, eh? Well, well, well. Very impressive, baby.
I don't remember writing any of that.
No, well, you never do you? When you read read stuff back that you wrote years and years ago, you think, I didn't write that. Because you just completely misremember it. And sometimes you take yourself by surprise. Yeah. There you go.
So a fun weekend ahead.
Fun weekend ahead. I think we'll leave it there for now because we're going to go out shortly and have some booze with Loz and have something to eat.
Yeah.
And no doubt have some kind of Lynchian cocktail in memory of David Lynch, who passed away yesterday.
Oh,
Bless
of course.
him. Yeah. And then I think maybe we'll stick our Lavalier mics on tomorrow night and report back on our experience of the day in gaming. What do you think?
That sounds like a good idea. It's
tradition, and Andrew just asked what I was drinking before I'd even had a chance to press record. So I'm slumming it with Newcastle Brown.
Ooh.
Yeah, I had to figure out. I've got quite a lot of beer in the kitchen, but a lot of it is what Loz brought round last time for episode 101, and we didn't get through it all. So as a result, I had to basically ignore it for the last month because I'm going to save it until the next time it's here, because there's some weird gingerbread toffee porter or something bizarre like that. So I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to wait until, I say waste it, it wouldn't be a waste to drink it, but I'm going to wait until Loz is back because that only seems fair. So next time Loz is over, we'll have some stupid beers. So.
I've got to ask, right, because I had some Newcastle Brown last year for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
And it didn't taste as nice as I remember it tasting.
Well, I tell you what, before we get to that, it's Andrew Beck. Welcome to Derry and Tom's.
Hello.
We'll explain why you're here in a wee while, but let's just get that question out of the way. So Newcastle Brown definitely isn't what it used to be. And I'm sure there was a time when Newcastle Brown was brewed like any other beer with natural brewing processes. But for at least 25 years, even before the manufacture of it moved to Tadcaster, which is where it's brewed now. It's not even brewed in Newcastle anymore. It was, even then, it was being brewed in, well, I said brewed, it was being manufactured in a fashion that I remember my dad talking about it, going, "Oh, don't drink that crap, it's Starlight Brew." I was like, what are you on about, Dad? And what he meant by that was it was made by a manufacturing process overnight. So basically Starlight, one night and it's done.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I remember seeing a documentary where somebody went to the Newcastle Brown Brewery and essentially it was huge industrial vats where a syrup and alcohol were injected into these huge vats and it took about 7 hours and then it was bottled. So Newcastle Brown, really, it's a stretch to even call it beer anymore.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's a guilty pleasure. I don't mind a bottle from time to time. And I can't remember why. I think I maybe got some in over Christmas. And this is the last one that's left. And then my backup is a King Goblin Imperial Ruby. So given the subject matter that we're going to be talking about, a goblin-based beer, I think, is quite apt.
Yeah, I like that.
But anyway, welcome, Andrew Beck, to Derry and Tom's. Now, of course, I invited you to come and talk to me because we were at GROGMEET a week and a half, almost 2 weeks ago. It'll be 2 weeks on Saturday, won't it? So we turned up to GROGMEET, and my first game, I sat at the table, and you were there. You introduced yourself. We've chatted on social media over the years, and that was the first time we've ever actually spoke in person, which was really lovely.
It was great to play with you. It was a good game, wasn't it?
It was an excellent game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm dropping this section in the middle of a couple of bits that me and Phil recorded. Phil and I recorded half an hour before we started GROGMEET, and we recorded half an hour the day we got home to talk about our experience. And I was going to just put it out there as a patron extra, but I thought, you know what? I bumped into Andrew Beck. He's a podcaster. He actually GM'd a game of Stormbringer that day. So why don't we hop online and have a talk about, number one, your history with Moorcock genre fiction and role-playing games, number two, your experience of GROGMEET, and number three, anything else that occurs to us as we go. So here we are. First of all, tell me about your background with Moorcock and genre fiction and how you got into things like the Stormbringer role-playing game.
So I've got to say, right, I was thinking, how can I make this interesting? Because it is the most generic story. It's almost like, you know, that one that every man our age has.
Yeah.
It's that one, right? And it's absolutely no difference. The timeline's the same. The start dates, early 80s, red box D&D. About 6 months later, got maybe first or second edition of Stormbringer. And that was it. Dropped D&D, played Stormbringer for the rest of the 80s, basically.
Yeah.
1989, stopped role-playing. Just absolutely stopped and didn't go back to it until probably 3 years ago, maybe 4, when my daughter was watching Stranger Things with me and said, "Dad, have you ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons?"
Ah, of course.
And I said, "Oh, I have, but I've got a better game than that up in the attic." and she played Stormbringer with me. Was her first RPG, and then we played a bit of D&D. But so that's the RPG thing. But why Stormbringer was my go-to game, was because I loved Moorcock before I heard of Dungeons and Dragons. And I was trying to think, how had I heard of Michael Moorcock then? Because I grew up in Rotherham, not much access to culture or counterculture in Rotherham in the 70s and early 80s. But I had a school teacher who, when I was about 9 or 10, read us The Hobbit. And that kind of, introduced me to fantasy genre fiction, really. And then, probably like a lot of kids, I went to the local library and there was a sci-fi and fantasy section. And I pretty much read everything in it. But the Michael Moorcock stuff that they had, which I read in no particular order, with no particular plan, just whenever there was a book in, was what really grabbed me. So he was probably the first author I would recognise by name as loving and been really into. But it was just a kind of random find in the library. And then I suppose there was a little bit of, if you like that kind of stuff, you liked rock music. And if you like rock music, sooner or later you discover Hawkwind. And probably discovered Hawkwind about the same time I started playing Stormbringer,
Yeah.
and so it all kind of sort of overlapped a little bit then. The kind of the music, the games, the books, the comics.
Of course, that'll be around about the time Chronicle of the Black Sword, I suppose, was
Yeah.
out, and that was, hitting people's turntables. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think both of us saw them on that tour, didn't we? Because I think we'd communicated about that at some point.
No, I think it must have been somebody else. I've never seen Hawkwind live. And
Ah,
as it happens, I'm, I'm a bit of a traitor to the cause because I'm not really a big fan of the Chronicle of the Black Sword album. No, I love my 70s Hawkwind. I love my psychedelic warlords and all that business. I love, War on the Edge of Time. But yeah, by the 80s, I think there's so many bands that were great in the 70s. 80s production killed them for me.
yeah.
And Chronicle of the Black Sword, somebody pointed out to me that the live album is a much better experience. And I wish I'd discovered the live album at the time. I might have had a better opinion of it. But yeah, the actual studio album, yeah, I'm not a fan of it at all.
It's a good point. And now, if I'd listened to either, which I probably wouldn't, but if I did, I'd listen to Live Chronicles, because I think the 80s one is probably a response to new wave of British heavy metal. It kind of, it had that kind of shinier production, punchier
Yeah.
sound, and I completely agree. If you like 70s Hawkwind, I could see why Chronicles, even if you're a big Elric fan, might have just
Yeah.
not sounded like your Hawkwind.
Yeah, and there's also an element of, again, I'm gonna get kicked out I'm gonna lose my cred here, lose my Hawkwind fan card. It just feels a little bit cheesy.
Oh yeah,
The interpretation. It's funny. My dad was a big Jethro Tull fan, right? So I was brought up on listening to songs from the Wood and Living in the Past. Not so much the very earlier albums, but songs from the Wood, Living in the Past were like almost on constant play in our house. And when The Broadsword and the Beast came out,
oh yeah.
some of my mates worshipped it. They thought it was wonderful. I mean, it's got the great album cover. It's got the runes. It looks the part. My sister loved it. For me, Broadsword and the Beast was another example of 80s slick metal production ruining a 70s band for me.
Yeah.
And to this day, I just can't get on with Broadsword and the Beast. So I kind of put Chronicle and the Black Sword and Broadsword and the Beast in a similar basket. Not that they're similar sounding, but I got a similar impression from them. It's like, this just feels too, I don't know. There's almost like a manufactured sort of sounding element to it.
Yeah, it's glossy.
Yeah. Whereas I've always liked my my rock music a bit rough around the edges.
Yeah.
So, but is your Stormbringer rule book still intact?
Well, no. I mean, for people who had the misfortune of playing with me at GROGMEET, I had my Stormbringer rulebook, and it was just in bits, so I couldn't find key bits of it because it's not in chronological order. It was. Luckily, one of the players had brought a copy that was in slightly better nick. It was the same crappy third edition Games Workshop one that I'd eventually. I think I lost the earlier one I'd got. Was using the third edition for a long time, so took that down.
Yeah.
And his was slightly better, but not much, to be honest. I don't think any of those third editions really kind of held together very well, did they?
Yeah. For people who are listening and wondering what we're talking about, Games Workshop in the 80s had a short run of hardback rule books. One was the Stormbringer RPG. The other one, I think, was Call of Cthulhu. Was it third edition? I think it might have been the Games Workshop Call of Cthulhu rulebook was exactly the same. If you breathed on it, the spine disintegrated and it just fell to pieces. So my Games Workshop Call of Cthulhu rulebook and my Stormbringer, my 80s Stormbringer rulebooks are long gone, long gone, long lost to the mists of time. Probably, oh God, I hate to say it, probably ended up in a skip or something like that. But many years ago. Many years ago, not that long ago, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, I saw on eBay someone selling a Stormbringer rulebook in exactly the condition you'd expect it to be when they were selling it for buy it now for £3.99. And the spine was disintegrated. The cover was barely hanging on. So I bought it, and then I took it to a printer's in Leeds who print up students' dissertations, and I got it rebound. With reading ribbons and nice green faux leather cover, Breakfast in the Ruins edition printed on the spine, and a couple of reading ribbons. And I also, they did a really good job. They even managed to stick the map on the inner leaf.
Nice.
The original cover, they reproduced it and put it on an inside page. And the best thing is, I had a PDF of the first Stormbringer companion. And I gave them the PDF, and they slapped that in there as well. So I've got a nice, tight, stitch-bound copy of the Stormbringer 3rd edition rulebook. Yeah.
I mean, this
with
is a
all
podcast,
the gonzo
right?
contents intact.
So there's only me that can see how beautiful that looks. So just people listening in, I've got to say, it's a thing of wonder. You'll all be covered in one of those. It is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I think what I'll have to do is probably put a photograph on along with the show notes. Although I won't. Makes it probably. I don't know if this makes it a rip-off or slightly more special. But when I picked it up, and I think it cost me £45 to get this rebound, and when I picked it up, I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's wonderful, brilliant. And then I looked at the spine, I don't know if you can see, but the writing on the spine's wonky.
Tiny bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tiny bit off-centre, but it's like, yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I did actually get to use that when I ran an online game of Stormbringer for some of the patrons, funnily enough.
Oh, nice.
Which, no, we didn't. Did we record that one? I don't think we did. I can't remember. Maybe we did record that one. Is that out there as a patron special? I don't know. I can't remember. But it's a nice thing to have. Anyway.
It's beautiful. Can I just say one more thing about the Michael Moorcock thing? Because I was a huge fan as a kid of Michael Moorcock, and then kind of grew up with him a little bit. And as he became a better writer, I became older and really liked his sort of mature later stuff like Mother London in my 20s. But then I stopped reading him altogether, and it was Breakfast in the Ruins podcast when I came across it that got me back into reading Moorcock. And I don't know if other people have had that experience, that they kind of dropped off on Moorcock at about the same time they dropped off on RPGs. And then that
has been said by a few people actually. There's some people who come to the podcast because they've found a Moorcock book and they're like, oh right, I quite enjoyed that. So they Google Michael Moorcock and somehow they come across the podcast.
Nice.
And then there are other people who, like yourself, have read Moorcock in the youth, and then much like the Deep Freeze with role-playing games, they went away from it, and then, for one reason or another, they happen across the podcast, and then, it kind of rekindles people's interest in it, all of which is great. I mean, the only reason I'm doing the podcast really is because I decided, do you know what, it's years since I've read a Michael Moorcock book, and I hadn't read most of them since the 80s, and I wanted to reread them, and I thought, when was it? It was 2019. I think I'd been made redundant. When was I made redundant? 2018, maybe, for the second time under the Tories. Got made redundant again. I was like, oh, fuck this. I need a hobby. I can't just sit and watch Judge Judy in my pants all day. I need a hobby. So I decided, right, I'm going to give podcasting a go. Before I got made redundant, I was commuting to Hull every day from Bradford. So it was hour and 45 minutes each way, sometimes more. Yeah, and podcasts filled a great hole in that. You can listen to the radio, you can listen to music. And I found some absolutely terrific podcasts. There's one called The Projection Booth, where some of their episodes are 4 and 5 hours long. They're absolutely fantastic. The Conan the Barbarian episode of The Projection Booth, highly recommended. Got a really good interview with Paul M. Salmon and a few other people. Yeah, really great. And of course, I discovered the Grognard files.
Yeah.
And, I think, I'm just trying to think how long Loz and I didn't game for. We did have a deep freeze, but I think we gamed until probably the mid-90s when Loz left Hull and moved to London. And then we had a big gap and probably tried again I don't know, late 2000s, maybe around about 2010. Loz was in Manchester. My mate Neil was somewhere in Leeds. My mate Robbo, who we used to game with, was in Hull. So everybody descended on our house in Bradford. And we thought, right, we're going to play a game of Call of Cthulhu,
Nice.
set in the 30s. And we thought, right, let's really get into it. We're gonna have food, we're gonna have cocktails, and basically all that happened is we all got absolutely hammered on Manhattans, and the game was an absolute fucking disaster. But we had such a good time. We did have another go, and then we just carried on, and we've been gaming again ever since.
Oh, nice. And so it's Cthulhu was your route back in then?
Yeah, and I think that was largely because, back in the day, I'm just trying to think. My entry game was AD&D, like lots of people. Not the red box. Some kid at school asked me if I wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, and it was AD&D First Edition. So that was my entry into games. I've been playing fighting fantasy game books and things like that. And from there, I think my second game was MERP, which I either bought or I got for Christmas off my mum and dad. Or I got it with pocket money, I can't remember. And then I think probably my third game was Call of Cthulhu when I was introduced to it by somebody else. And I think, like a lot of people, Call of Cthulhu might have... No, it wasn't my introduction to Lovecraft. Pops introduced me to Lovecraft, but he said I don't like Lovecraft.
Right.
He preferred William Hope Hodgson and Arthur Machen and stuff like that. So I was aware of Lovecraft, but I hadn't read any. And then I played the Call of Cthulhu game. I got the second edition box set, which I think most people had. And, all the mysterious terms and the stat blocks for monsters with 200 hit points and all this nonsense.
Yeah.
And that kind of got me, interested in reading some Lovecraft. But then largely, I think most of the gaming we were doing from the age I was like 18, 19 was I kind of gate crashed Robbo's house, and Loz and Neil were there, and I realised that they'd played games before. It was like, right, I'm going to run a game for you. And then we ended up playing Twilight 2000, Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green style.
Oh, nice.
And a Merc 2000 campaign that I ran for about 2 years that all ended terribly. Because, I think everybody's got a story of running a campaign for 2 years that just explodes.
Yeah.
And turns to shit because of some bad decisions or not being in the right frame of mind, let's say, to run or play a game. Yeah, so we always went back to Cthulhu, though. What is it about Call of Cthulhu? Because, of course, Stormbringer shares a root with Call of Cthulhu, doesn't it, in terms of system? What is it about that D100 system that pulls people back to it?
It is compelling, isn't it, as a system? And I played Delta Green at GROGMEET, which I'd never played before, and of course that's the same kind of basic build, isn't it? And it's just lovely. It's just a really easy system. You can get your head around the percentages. There's nothing kind of complicated about it. The mechanics are so straightforward that you can get on with the game. And I think the mechanics almost kind of chunter away in the background, don't they, really? And you just get on
they're
with
intuitive.
playing.
They're really intuitive. If anybody's listening to this and you don't know how role-playing games work, if you compare D&D to Call of Cthulhu in terms of how obtuse they are, then, Call of Cthulhu's still got that same basic root, hasn't it? RuneQuest and Stormbringer as well, in that you have 3d6 for core stats, which is a little bit weird. Now, obviously, the reason for that is six-sided dice. It's like, right, okay, you get a nice bell curve. If you roll 3 6-sided dice for a stat for strength. But to this day, why the fuck is D&D still using 3 to 18 for its stats when once you've got your bonuses, nothing else matters anymore? The actual number is meaningless once you've got your stat bonus. The good thing about Call of Cthulhu is, even though to this day the 7th edition, I think, has made it more explicit, there was always that core idea that if you wanted to do something strength or intelligence based, you could take it and multiply it by 3 or multiply it by 5. What did they have in Call of Cthulhu? The resistance roll table, and they had it in Stormbringer as well, I think, which I always thought was a little bit weird, and I don't think I ever referred to it.
Well, it's funny. I actually got to use it at GROGMEET once I found it. And I don't think I'd ever used it at all in Stormbringer before. And there was a
Yeah.
dilemma about, what am I going to do about this? I think it was, I don't know what it was, something versus something somebody wanted to do, and I didn't know what to do. And I thought, there's a resistance table somewhere. So I faffed about for a few minutes finding it and said, right, here we go.
Yeah.
And it was all right, actually.
You know what? We've got to talk about the experience of running and playing games as well. We'll get to that in a wee while. I'm going to ask you about your Stormbringer game as well. But there's a core question for me that I'm going to ask of you because, of course, in real life you're also a therapist, aren't you?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So when Phil and I went to GROGMEET, Phil has only ever played with strangers once, and that was at Andy Clark's 50th birthday party. He had a Clarkicon in the afternoon in Wallasey, and we went to a pub in Wallasey, and Phil was super nervous about it because, I mean, we've explained this elsewhere, but Phil is, I say, a relative newcomer to gaming. She's probably been doing it for close to 10 years now, but she used to sit in the front room and watch movies while we all gamed in the kitchen, or me and Loz would go to Hull and she would do something else. Now she games, but she only ever really games in our kitchen, so that was their first ever experience. And in the run-up to Christmas, I was saying, GROGMEET tickets will become available. GROGMEET slots will become available to non-patrons of the Grognard files. So if you're going to play, and I think you should, because the last time I did GROGMEET, she came, but she went shopping and did other things while I did my 2 gaming sessions. I said, if you're up for it, and I think you should, let me know. And then she was like, I don't know. And then she caught wind of the fact that GROGMEET slots were available, and I can't remember how. And she went, why didn't you tell me? Oh, right, okay. So we got her into a couple of games, and it was Phil's first time. Do you know what? She absolutely loved it.
Brilliant.
She loved it. She gamed with a table of complete strangers playing AD&D in the afternoon. And get this, as a result, she's going to have her name in a book as a playtester, which is absolutely fantastic.
It's a great debut, that, isn't it?
Well, I've been gaming since I was 10 and I've never been a playtester. You know, I've never got my name in a published supplement as a playtester. And she played a game earlier on in the day. She played a game of Morkborg with someone who she's met before, Kath, who was Clarkicon, and a couple of people that I gamed with on a Thursday night, one of whom, Dave Griffiths, has been on this podcast and is a patron of the podcast. But she absolutely loved it. And when we played Delta Green, which was our first game on the day, I think, in the morning, which is when we met face to face for the first time, it was an absolutely cracking game. There's always that spell, I think, for the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes where I have that sense that I always have when I play a game, or more so when I run a game, which is just like the first time I ever played, which is there's a nagging doubt in my head about how's this going to go? Are people going to buy into it? Am I going to buy into it? Or am I just going to sit here kind of tapping my fingers on the table and not? And then, of course, 10 minutes later, you're like bought into it. Yeah. You know, you're absolutely bought into it. And I think we bought into it really, really quickly. You and I were mission specialists. So our characters sort of had a bond anyway by dint of the fact that we were the ones who'd do the spacewalk. We were the ones who'd be in harm's way and all this business. So there's a real kind of instant connection. And it was fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
It was such a good experience, that game. You know, the fact that it was run by a really experienced and talented GM was great. The other 2 players were great. And at the end of those 3.5 hours, I had a buzz.
Yeah.
And you get that from a good game, don't you? Why is gaming such a buzz for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I can it's just about role-playing gaming in particular. Because that is the buzz for me. I'm kind of indifferent to computer games. They don't do anything for me, but RPGs do. And I think there's 2 things. One, there's a massive social element, but it's a structured social element. So when I'm kind of down the pub, at a kind of go around for someone's house for food, it's unstructured, and I sometimes find it really burdensome and hard work to kind of manage the social aspects of that encounter. But the really nice thing about a game for me is that you're socializing with people, you've got instantly something in common, You've got grounds for conversations that are about the game or around the game, but it's kind of structured and laid out really nicely. So any kind of social awkwardness you might have from kind of playing make believe with a bunch of strangers is because it's what it is, right? It's
Yeah,
weird when
absolutely.
you think about it.
Yeah.
Is managed by the boundaries around the expectations that are already put in place. Like everybody has a set of internal rules about how it's going to work. How you play a game, how you socialize around a game, what you might chat about, and it just kind of makes it all work really smoothly. And I think for me, when I'm in that environment, that internal chatter of self-doubt and worry and thinking, oh, am I making a dick of myself here, or whatever it is, just goes, because the boundaries of gaming kind of take care of all that really nicely. So for me, it's about that. It's a sort of structured social event that's really nice and lets you forget yourself for a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. That's for me why it really clicks. But I don't know if that resonates at all.
Yeah, absolutely, it resonates. And the reason why I refer to you being a therapist is because the first thing that occurred to me after Saturday, the first session on Saturday, was I came out of that feeling refreshed and recharged, and it was like therapy.
Yeah.
You know, it was like it was like therapy. It was something, and just like therapy. Before it, I had a sense of like free floating anxiety about a variety of different things, which I have whenever I engage in that activity. And then I worked through it very quickly, and you lose yourself in it. You give yourself over to it, and you accept it, which enables you to process a lot of things. You process emotions, you process interactions with other people, whether they're people you've known for 30 years or whether they're complete strangers. And it really is, it's like a flush. It's like an emotional, intellectual flush of your system. And I think that's why I've always enjoyed it so much.
Can I pick up on one thing about that, which was the acceptance bit? Because I think that's really interesting, that when you're playing a game, you will experience either yourself or through your character some strong emotions at times. You know, that might be fear or elation or, well, all sorts of stuff really. And
Yeah.
and because what we know from a lot of what we understand about mental ill health is that that's often linked to not accepting experiences, not accepting that you're going to be uncomfortable, not accepting that things may be difficult or painful or a struggle. But in acceptance of emotion, which is what a lot of therapies get you to work towards, really, you experience a degree of kind of freedom from that and do better in life. And actually, when you're playing a game, you experience the fact that you're going to feel disappointment in the game, you're going to feel anger, you're going to feel frustration at either the NPCs or the people you work with, and accepting that full range of human emotion, I think it's probably quite good for you, isn't it? Giving you, 3.5 hours to just have all that stuff happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also something which is built into it. Because we interact with people all the time, don't we? I interact with people all, I've been at work today, I've been interacting with people all day. I'm paid to do it, I'm there to do it. I wouldn't necessarily choose to do it, Whereas the difference with the interaction around a gaming table, obviously, put aside all the stuff about goblins and playing whatever you're playing. You might be playing a superhero, you might be playing, just tell me, I've never played a superhero role-playing game in my life, but a lot of people like their superhero role-playing games, and generally a lot of people like games where their characters are powerful, powerful, capable, or in some way very, very special. I should point out, and Loz will attest to this, I like my games to be all about shit kickers. I like low-powered games. I generally tend to like playing low-powered characters, and that kind of game appeals to me more. But all of that stuff aside, you're putting yourself in a scenario, and someone like GROGMEET or any of these other kind of gaming meetups is a similar thing. You're putting yourself out there into a scenario where you're going to interact with people who you may know online, or you may know vaguely, or not know at all. And you don't really know what's coming, so you get that sense of nervousness and nervousness, anticipation, combination of the two. I don't know. And then, but the fact is, you're actually stepping up and putting yourself there. You're putting yourself out there, and you're putting yourself out there for other people. And when you do that and people respond well to you, or people respond to what you're doing, or you respond well to other people, and you laugh and you achieve something and you feel like you've reached some form of emotional peak as part of the game, and you get a solution or you get a dramatic moment that really, really, bookmarks things or punctuates things. I don't think there's anything else quite like it in terms of social experience that you can have with a group of complete strangers.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you were speaking, I was trying to think, what's that like? What does that sound like? Because you're right, there is something quite unique about it. But I wonder if, I mean, I am a really poor musician. I can't really play instruments very well at all. I wonder if turning up and jamming with a bunch of people is similar, or
Yeah,
people who do improv theatre, which is kind of not far off role playing.
yeah.
You kind of turn up at an improv class and make something together by trusting each other, listening to each other, paying attention to what another's doing in order to create something kind of unexpected. And and
Mm,
and so and so I get what you say about the uniqueness, but I wonder if there are just similar things that I mean I never access because I can't play an instrument and I wouldn't go to an improv class, but it might be that same buzz of just working together to
yeah,
make a story in an RPG, really, don't you? You tell a
yeah,
really good story together.
yeah. I think you're probably entirely on the money there because, yeah, I mean, I don't play an instrument. I've had I had the odd moment over the years where I've interacted with music through the medium of recording
Oh,
with people going way, way, way back, I might point
you
out.
can't just leave that hanging. I
Uh,
think
I did
come
some
on.
singing. I did some
Ah,
singing back in the day.
cool.
But yeah, it was not something that I ever pursued. You know, I don't think I ever had the bottle for it, frankly.
Yeah.
So, putting yourself out there in front of my mate Chris or my mate Wayne or someone like that when I was 22 and stoned, that's one thing. And recording something on a 4-track. Okay, I did that.
Nice.
And it was good fun. But that's a long way from having the capability to actually write music or write
Yeah.
lyrics. That is way beyond me,
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
beyond me. And even then, to have the bottle to actually stand up, other than doing Born Free on karaoke or Okie from Muskogee when I've got 9 pints in me, that's about my limit. I do a mean Okie from Muskogee, I should point out, but drunken karaoke, that's about my limit these days. But yeah, I think you're probably right. And, funny enough, Loz, Neil, who I used to game with, they were in a band, so they'd have a specific opinion on it. But I think, so I can only really say it from my perspective of all the things that I do and all the things that I experience. It's unique amongst all the things that I've done and all the things that I've experienced, and it's a unique buzz, a creative buzz, and I love it. And I think this is why I'm drawn back to it still in my 50s to carry on doing it.
And it is creative, isn't it? And I think that's a nice thing. Like, I know I'm never going to write a novel. I know I'm never going to get, I know that. But I can write a nice game
Yeah.
and 5 people will enjoy it. And I feel satisfied by that. And it's just great, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's brilliant. Had I clocked the fact that you were running Stormbringer when I was choosing my game, I think it was full by the time, because I was late getting on to Warhorn to actually choose games. I think there were only about half a dozen left with slots when I got on there. Otherwise, I probably would have ended up on your game because I think, when was it? Was it Grog? Do you know what? I'm starting to confuse myself now. I must have been to more than one GROGMEET or something else because Ralph Lovegrove, who did the Fictoplasm podcast, I played his Stormhack game. And Jem Gilbert, who was on your table,
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Jem played that game as well. But that wasn't GROGMEET. Where the fuck was that? Oh my God. My memory is shot to pieces. So, was it GROGMEET? Oh God, I don't know.
We're both
don't
at
know,
that
but
kind of age, aren't we? Where it just all kind of
yeah,
blurs a little bit.
Yeah, if anybody's listening who was at a gaming event where Ralph did a White Dwarf Stormbringer scenario, but used his own Storm hack rules, and I'm sure Jem Gilbert was at the table that time. Where was it?
Yeah.
Where was it and when? Because I can't remember.
Yeah.
Oh, God. So tell us about your Stormbringer game on last Saturday afternoon, then.
Oh yeah, so I really enjoyed running it. I had a lovely group, and I thought, yeah, I've never done a con game before. I've never run one, so I thought, well, it's got to be fast moving. You've got a limited amount of time, so I took some advice from a few. I think I listened to that Burn After Running podcast. It was
Yeah.
talking about how to run a con game, and said drop people straight in the action. So so just kind of got something that was really fast moving, started right in the middle of something, and it was the sack of Ymir. So I wanted to do, yeah, I think it's the most iconic moment in the
Yeah.
Elric books, and tell a side story around what happened during the sack. And I never thought to do that back when I was doing Stormbringer in the 80s, but
Yeah.
there are so many of those big historical moments in the Elric novels that you could be tangential to, aren't they, really? But I thought I'd go for the big one, as it was GROGMEET, and I was very excited to be there. I thought I'm going to go for the iconic Stormbringer moment, and the team really got behind it, and everybody kind of brought their best, went for the pace, lent into their characters quite a bit. We had four quite contrasting young kingdoms kind of archetypes, really, and people ran with that, and it was just great fun, really, and tried to get that sense of what makes a Stormbringer game work. It's doom, isn't it? It's kind of heading rapidly towards something terrible, and compromising what you think's right in order to get there, and those compromises lead into problems, and just sort of try to do something in the spirit of Michael Moorcock, and but also, yeah, you're running Stormbringer, you want a few kind of walk-on cameos, don't you? So had a couple of my favourite characters from the kind of Eternal Champion books. So Rose von Beck
Yeah.
is a character I just think is a fantastic character that Moorcock wrote, and I think he realised how good she was as well, and kind of kept coming back to her, and she sort of weaves through some of those later Eternal Champion stories, doesn't she, in a fantastic way. And then Gaino the Damned, who I think is just a great mustache twirling villain, really, isn't he? And
Yeah.
if you're going to run a con game, you may as well get a couple of those kind of nice cameos in as well.
Yeah, Loz could never resist putting Gainer the Damned into his Hawkmoon games. Yeah. Loz ran a really long, the 2-year long campaign that ended really badly. Well, Loz says it ended badly. Loz hates the fact it ended that way. We all thought it was hilarious, but it did involve absinthe and chartreuse, so it was probably doomed to failure. But yeah, he introduced Gain of the Damned halfway through his first run at it, because he ran it for about a year, and then I took over for probably 6 or 7 sessions. Then Loz took it back over again. Loz, if you're listening, Loz, you know this is true. Loz is a restless player, and all he's thinking about is, when am I GMing next? He prefers to GM than play.
So when you say it was disastrous, was it just like, was it his great big finale that you wouldn't go along with? Is that why it was a disaster? Because did he have something in mind that you wouldn't kind of cooperate with?
I think Loz had something in mind, and none of us could figure out what it was.
Yeah.
And we all got absolutely arseholed. Because the problem we have, you see, is that when we get together to game, it's just like, take me and Loz as an example. So me and Loz, we've known each other since we were 18, 19, whatever it is. We were drinking buddies for a long time. I think we get on really well on an intellectual level. We have a very, very similar sense of humour. I love podcasting with Loz. When I first set this podcast up, the first person I wanted to do it with was Loz. But the thing is, Loz has got a life and Loz has got a family, so Loz hasn't got time to do 103, 104 episodes of a podcast. Loz can do it when he can do it. And when we actually see each other face to face, it's like, right, oh God, what do we do? Do we game? Do we podcast? Do we get drunk? Do we go for a curry? The answer is usually 3 of those 4 things.
Nice.
And most recently, I think gaming has probably lost out when Loz and I get together, because Loz, by his own admission, even though he's my oldest gaming friend who I still game with, the people I gamed with when I was at school, I've no longer in touch with and haven't been probably since I left school. He has a very specific type of game that he likes to play, and he has a very specific type of game that he likes to run. Whereas my current group, they will play largely anything, but they're really enjoying playing a stripped down version of D&D at the moment called Let's Play Fucking D&D, which strips the rules down and character generation to less than 6 pages. And it's fine, it's entertaining, and I don't mind if people want to play a halfling, I don't mind if people want to, play a bard. I'm quite happy with that as long as they have a good time, as long as we all have a good time. Whereas I think if you said to Loz, I think Loz actually tried running D&D 5th edition once, and this is classic Loz. He said, right, I'm going to run D&D. I was like, oh yeah, cool. He said, but I'm going to have a rule, no magic users. I was like, Loz, don't run D&D then. Run something else. Run Hawkmoon again.
Yeah. There's plenty of games without magic users.
Yeah. It was funny. I mean, we played it and it was funny. But that night, I made about 5 gallons of punch, and I was the closest one to it. And about 2 hours in, I was absolutely arseholed. And you hear stories of people having bad players. I was probably Loz's bad player that night, and I still have sorrowful emotions about it when I think back to it. But I'd like to say we've all been there, but I think some people are probably 100% great gamers and great players across the board. Whereas, I think on that occasion I might have let my frustrations get the better of me.
But old friends can forgive each other, and
that's right.
Probably found it quite funny at the time as well.
Yeah. Well, Loz forgave me by running games for other people, not me.
Yeah.
So Loz has got his game in life, and I've got my game in life. And at some point we will game together again, and we'll have a good time. But it goes back to that thing. It's like, right, we all get together. So I'm running Let's Play Fucking D&D on Saturday, in fact, 2nd session. And there's my cousin Emily and her other half. There's Phil's nephew Joe, who declared himself D&D curious when we were drinking with him in a cocktail bar about 3 months ago. So we're someone like us, if a 26-year-old nephew drunkenly says, "Yeah, I'm quite curious about D&D," well, it's a red rag to a bull, isn't it? What would you do, Andrew?
What would you do? Fuck,
absolutely. Get him in a headlock, drag him home, and make him play D&D. So he came and played and enjoyed it, and our mate Gemma plays as well, and she's a relative newcomer to gaming. So we have a great table. It's like 50% female. It's ages from 26 up to 55, 56 or whatever. So it's a really nice spread of people, but it still comes down to the same thing. We're seeing our friends. So do we game? Or do we get drunk? Or do we have a pizza? We'll do it all.
Nice.
We'll do it all. So inevitably, it's a social occasion that involves everything, including booze, which I have to admit, when you booze, when you're gaming, it can go one or two ways. Often both ways. Various points across the evening. But what it generally means is that it all peters to a drunken halt about midnight, and nobody can remember what happened for the last hour the next time you play, if anything. Yeah.
So when you say it's a campaign, it's almost like you wake up each morning with a blank memory of what happened the last time you were together. Yeah. Your character's like, what? How did we get here?
Yeah. This is why I need to get better at pacing games, because that really just sounds like a series of Elric short stories, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Every game starts with Moonglum saying we're down to our last Imperial Dragon coin, and Elric goes, "Oh, well, we ain't got that. I gave it to the landlord last night to pay for our rooms." And Moonglum's like, "No!" But it's the same with Conan stories. Conan might finish one story with some treasures. The next story is skint or is half dead on a battlefield. And that's, what you did. Absolutely right. Start every game in media res.
Yep.
And, everybody should be skint. Everybody should be hungry. And then you've got your player's motivation as well.
And then you just crack on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, Andy, I want to ask you about something, if that's all right. And that is how amazing was that Michael Moorcock episode you did where you interviewed him for episode 100. I'm really curious about what it was like for you as a long-time fan to have got all that time to ask the kind of questions that must have been on your mind for a long time about such a huge figure in our kind of field of gaming and literature. What was it like to be doing that?
You know what? It was fucking cool.
Yeah,
It was cool as fuck.
it was.
Right, quite apart from anything else. But I'd thought about this when we did the first Moorcock birthday episode, which I think was only our third or fourth episode, because we somehow found out, and I can't remember how, that Moorcock's birthday was the same day as Phil's, and it was like, well, what a weird coincidence. So we decided, right, okay, on that 18th of December 2019, we were in Whitby for Phil's birthday, and I said, you know what? We should record like a birthday episode, celebrate your birthday, celebrate Mike's birthday. You could choose what you want to talk about, and she decided she wanted to read a Conan story, so we did the Tower of the Elephant. And people really embraced it and engaged with it, and people sent in messages and various other bits and pieces. Wishing Michael Moorcock and Phil happy birthday. And I learned through his Facebook page that someone had posted it on there's a Moorcock Facebook fan, whatever Facebook has. I'm not on Facebook. And Mike goes on it occasionally. I think he has. His name is Buggerly Otherly. Or was that Moorcock's Miscellany? Anyway, he goes on there and he interacts with the people on there. And somebody had posted it, and they sent me a screen grab, and he'd listened to it, and he said, "Nice people, nice thoughts. Happy birthday to Phil."
Oh,
so that was like our third or fourth episode. So that was oh, that's fucking amazing. Not only Michael Moorcock has heard our voices, which was really fucking weird. And at that point, I thought, I knew that he'd been guests on podcasts and stuff like that. Like Dirk had him on the Grognard Files. It was great. He'd been on the Appendix M podcast, which was really good. And a couple of years later, Joe Monty, who's his editor at Saga Press, comes on board as a patron. So I'm chatting with Joe Monty. And then I had Joe Monty on the birthday special last year, and talking to him about being Moorcock's editor. And he said, if you want me to hook you up with Linda, who basically manages all of his PR and everything, I'll put you in touch.
Nice.
And I said at the time, well, you know what? We've been doing it 4 years, and I still haven't really thought of an angle, because I don't want to ask him about Elric. I don't want to ask him about, all of the usual things. I don't want to ask him about the Stormbringer role-playing game. I don't want to ask him about the stuff that is answered umpteen times. And then I forgot about it again. And I didn't want it to feel like work, So anyway, long story short, Joe contacts me around about October or November because Warhound and the World's Pain, the Saga Press edition, is coming out. And then he said, have you thought any more about getting Mike on? He said, it's time.
Great.
So this is Joe said, it's time. So I said, all right. So a week later, I got an email doing an introduction with Linda. So I was like, all right, it's real now.
Yeah.
oh God, it's real. And I was like, oh, what do I ask? What do I do? Blah, blah, blah. I thought, oh, fuck this. Just give yourself half a dozen prompts. So one of my things was tell me the truth about your 3-day book process from the late 60s.
Yeah.
Our fantasy in our heads is that you were speeding your tits off, throwing pages over your shoulder. And I got to ask him that almost, verbatim, which was great, absolutely lovely. But as it happens, the moment he came online, he was chatting to me, and I had to press record because we were already talking about Ingleton and Curry's, and I was thinking, holy shit, this is the easiest thing I've ever done. He's the easiest person to talk to that you could possibly imagine. He's so warm and engaging, and then it really just ended up taking a life and direction of its own, and it was fantastic. It was really great.
And I think that the warm is exactly what I took away when I listened to it. I thought that was a really warm discussion between two people who are just like comfy with each other, just shooting the breeze. It was just lovely, and
You know
what a
what? It's really nice of you to say that, and I think that's why it was so enjoyable, because I got to tell him about Pops, and I got to tell him about, I mean, at one point I even mentioned Pops' fucking pop-down ashtray and stuff. It was like, I wouldn't have written that down as a
No.
question. The only reason I was saying these things is because it became a conversation, and that was great. So yeah, it's really kind of you to say that, but it was thoroughly enjoyable. Yeah, and hopefully we'll be doing it again in the next month or two.
Oh, fantastic!
Which is really nice.
Yeah,
So back to our topic. Are you doing Owlbear and Wizard Staff in September?
It's never even occurred to me to do it. I've got to be honest. The only times I've ever been to a convention is GROGMEET, and I've never thought, oh, you could go further and do others. So I've heard of it because it's been mentioned on Grognard Files podcast.
Yeah,
but that's all I know about it. So should I check it out?
Yes, and do you use Discord and things like that?
Just recently, yes. I did a really good Rogue Mistress campaign through Discord with a guy some of your listeners will know, Tentacled Whisperer, who
yes, Dave Dempster, yeah.
And I played on his Rogue Mistress campaign on Discord. So that was my introduction to Discord.
Yeah.
I can't say that I know how to use Discord apart from clicking on something and appearing, but can I find out about it there?
Well, Owlbear and Wizard Staff has got its own Discord server, which Matthew, who runs it, he sent me the link to it a couple of days ago. So if you've got a Discord account, then you'll be able to get on the Owlbear and Wizard Staff Discord and keep up to speed on what's going on. Now, we're going, the only reason being, Chris Sharp, who, when we got to the Port Street Beer House, I bumped into him during the day. And I know Chris because when we did the Tolkien Moorcock Weekender of gaming, is that where I did Ralph's Stormbringer game? No, was Ralph? No, I don't think Ralph was there that weekend. Oh my God, my memory. But anyway, it was a weekend of Tolkien and Moorcock role-playing games with a night in the pub on the Saturday night. And it was in a massive Airbnb with a wonderful, massive kitchen with a huge table. And we spent the weekend doing games there. And I met Chris there. So I bumped into him in Port Street Beer House on Saturday night. And he said, are you going to Owlbear and Wizard Staff? And I was like, Loz and I were going to go in 2020. We'd booked our hotel and everything, and then lockdown happened.
Yeah.
So it never happened, and I've never revisited the idea of doing Owlbear. But Chris Sharp said, it's great, you should go. So I had several pints in me, so I just went on booking.com and booked a hotel in Leamington Spa. And then next day I thought, I hope I booked the wrong weekend. Sorry, the right weekend. Otherwise, we're just going to Leamington Spa for a weekend. But it turns out it was the right weekend. And I think the Warhorn will be going up for registrations at some point. So even if you don't get on Discord, when the Warhorn goes up, I'll send you the link to register. And yeah, it's just, I think, do they do the Friday night, or is it just beer and curry on the Friday night and then 3 games on the Saturday?
Are you going to run a game at it?
Ooh.
What do you think? That sounds like a maybe.
Oh, well. I've thought, because you get online GROGMEET, virtual GROGMEET, and all these things. I've thought a few times about shall I do a game, and I always bottle it. But I have run online games now twice for the patrons. I ran Stormbringer, I think 4 times. We never finished it because I can't pace games. So what originally was an idea for a one-shot, we played it 4 times. I'm still never finished it. And then I did a one-shot of Blacksword Hack Ultimate Chaos Edition sometime in 2023, I think. And actually, I actually managed to pace that, and it ended up being a good solid 3.5-hour game. Maybe 4-hour game. It was good fun. Dave Dempster, Tentacle Whisperer, played that as well. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I've had the experience of running online, but I don't know if I've got the bottle and the confidence to run a game for a table of people, because all of the GMs are so good and so talented and so experienced that I think I probably need to build up to it a little bit.
But what I would say, because this was the first time I GM for anybody apart from my kids and their friends, or a group of friends here where I live in West Yorkshire, where we play occasionally. So it's the first time I'd done anything like that. And the other people at the table help you along, because it's not, it's easy to think it's your responsibility to give them 3.5 hours of fun, but it's not really. You're all going to work together and make it a good game. And I guess if Owlbear gets the same kind of people going along as GROGMEET does, you'll find a bunch of people at the table who will help you get that game up and running, enter into the spirit of it, and kind of help you to have a good time, and not just sort of sit there expecting to be entertained. It's a kind of team effort, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a fair point, actually. That's a fair point. Yeah, maybe I'll give it some thought. And at the end of the day, I think we talked about this briefly when we were in the bar in, what was that place called? Whitworth Lock. If we're ever going to do a Moorcock Con in Bradford, I need to hone my skills.
You do.
I need to pull my finger out and give it a go. So, well, you know what? Food for thought. On that note, I'm going to go away from this with some food for thought and think about it. But in the meantime, when I get the deets on Owlbear and Wizard Staff, I will send them your way.
Thank you. And Andy, I just want to say it was great to meet you the other week, and it's been a real pleasure having the podcast along, getting me back into stuff, and I really appreciate the work that you've done. And well, I look forward to seeing you maybe in Leamington Spa, maybe in Bradford for the Moorcon.
Yeah, Moorcon. Yeah,
we've said that out loud now. It's just got to happen.
That's right. Yeah, it's manifested now. It's a thing. There's no flushing it away now. Yeah. Well, you know, it's great to meet you as well, Andrew, and hopefully we'll get you on again at some point. Maybe even talk about a book.
Oh, yeah.
How about that? Yeah, how about that? All right, pal. Well, great to talk to you, and well, I'll see you on the other side, somewhere in the million spheres.
Take care.
Well, it's the morning after the day before. I know we said yesterday, babe, that we would record and then go and game and then record afterwards. But what did we end up doing after we gamed?
Go drinking.
We went drinking. We went to the pub and we had a lovely time with Kath and with Dave and Vicky, and guest appearances from James Knight and, of course, from Ian Stead, aka Biomass, from Clarky the Cruel. And we bumped into a few other people along the way, like Chris and Dirk and some of the peeps, and it was a really nice day, wasn't it?
It was a very nice day and evening.
So, feedback on your first ever day of gaming without me, obviously. Gaming solo. Not solo, but round a table full of people that you'd never met before, except Kath, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, what is your judgment on your first ever GROGMEET?
So, to start, just before we went down, I was very anxious.
You were, weren't you?
So, fortunately, it only happened in the last 10-15 minutes before we went down.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. The first game was like what we do at home. There was three ladies and 2 men. It was a good mix. Everybody was absolutely lovely. Tom, who ran the game, did a fantastic game. Really helpful whenever I got stuck, as were the other players. And that's what I've learned to love about gaming, is that you do it as a team. I have heard stories where some people go a bit more rogue and off character, but I never came across that, and I loved working with others.
Yeah.
And Night of Blood, the morkboard, was really good fun.
Yeah, so of course you played Morkborg in the morning, didn't you?
Yeah.
And there was Dave and Vicky and Kath, who you've gamed with before and met before. Dave and Vicky, who were part of the Thursday night crew that I was invited to game with several years ago by Clarky, so I'd gamed online with them but never met them in person. It was run by Tom, aka Tom Tremendous on Blue Sky.
Martin, yeah.
So what did you make of Morkborg as a system?
I found it, as you said I would, quite very easy to follow. There was also a chap there called Simon who was really lovely. I don't know if anyone else had met him, but There's something about gaming where people chat like they've known each other for a while, and I think it's that common interest. So everybody at that table was lovely. Hard at first trying to block out all the other tables. There was a
it was
lot
loud,
of noise, and Tom was fairly quiet, but I was sat quite close to him, so that did help. But it was a lot of fun, and I think because the system wasn't too complicated for me, I always get tied up in the dice,
Yeah.
and it takes me out of the game a little bit because I get anxious about, am I going to need to know what dice?
Yeah.
Once, within the first 5-10 minutes, I learned the dice I needed, and I knew exactly what I needed for what.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. So for my benefit, you're going to have to explain to me how within an hour or an hour and a bit, suddenly a pantomime horse was involved.
Now, trying to make it as quick as possible,
Yeah.
we were walking along this very muddy road and we got hit by a carriage, which turned out the guy who was driving the carriage, well, it was horses, but was, driving it, had been shot with an arrow, and he was dead. So we followed it, and by the time we caught up to it, all of the people in the carriage were dead, as was the drivers.
Yeah.
And we found lots of costumes, so they were an act.
Yeah.
And we found some information that they were going to this town to perform. Don't ask why, but we decided we would go and take their place. Well, do ask why. It was because we were getting paid for it, and we were going to get a warm night bed for the night.
So you basically had to transform yourselves into travelling mummers and take on their role.
So we were told we could all have one piece, something from it. And along the way, Kath also had a talking horse.
Yeah.
And when we were in the pub trying to get rooms because they said they were full, so we were really pushing, somebody had said, we've got a talking horse.
Yeah.
And he went, all right, I'll show us it. And the talking horse refused to come in. So Dave said he'd be a pantomime horse and ended up with Vicky as the back end. That's how we ended up with the pantomime horse.
Wow. That does sound very Dave, actually. So, of course, Dave and Kath were part of that group that Clarky ran games for on a Thursday night during the pandemic that he invited me to join. And that kind of goofiness and frivolity absolutely underpinned all of those games, which is why I ended up playing them for such a long time and sticking with that group for 2 or 3 years on a Thursday night. Until it sadly, I think it just kind of petered out a little bit, as these things often do. But, Cass mentioned that she's got a little bit of appetite for maybe getting an alternate week online game going. So yeah, but no, that sounds like a lot of fun.
It was. Yeah. It really was from start to finish.
My first game in the morning was a game of Delta Green, as a modern day conspiracy game involving the dark underbelly of government departments and secret organisations and the Cthulhu mythos. And we were astronauts who were doing a space shuttle mission who were surprised to find that we had to take 2 civilian specialists with us, one of whom was a sweaty, out of shape, 40-year-old, nerd, and the other one was a nicotine-stained, skinny, hypertensive, super ill guy, both of whom we figured out were theoretical mathematicians, which automatically caused a combination of suspicion among some crew members and other crew members who were true patriots who were all about orders and chain of command. We're like, you know what, these are our orders, this is what we've got to do, which initially I fell into that side. But to cut a long story short, it ended up being a mystery game where there was a little bit of investigation as to what these theoretical mathematicians were up to. Why would a satellite require theoretical mathematicians to repair equipment, which made no sense? To cut a long story short, it involved magical rituals and us being set up as myself and Andrew Beck's character, who's transcultural CBT on Blue Sky, by the way. We were the mission specialists who would spacewalk to the satellite with one of these civilians. The other one was basically there as a contingency backup in case the other one never made it to space alive because they were so unfit. And then we discovered that the space shuttle had something fitted so that ground control could override its control and take us out of the equation, and that our EEV suits had poison capsules built into them with a kill switch. So we were set up as potential human sacrifices. So when this guy conducted the ritual at the satellite, they could murder us to provide the release of mental energy to power the magic to do whatever was required. But of course, we discovered this. And to cut a long story short, it ended up with my character spinning off helpless into space, unrescuable because of a series of failed rolls. The other mission specialist, played by Andrew Beck, opened his own visor to expose himself to space and killed himself. And the mission commander basically just activated space shuttle burn and pissed off back to Earth. So it was a classic Delta Green game, really. I remember I ran a Delta Green game for Lords, Neil and Robbo back in the mid-90s, and they were FBI agents, and it was weird things going on in a small American town. And that ended up in a series of blown critical fumbles and everybody dying horribly as well. It just seems to be a Delta Green thing. So yeah, it was really entertaining, brilliantly GM'd by a guy called Steph. Yeah, it was fantastic. So that was really, really good fun. And then we popped to the hotel bar and had a couple of drinks, had some lunch, didn't we? Had a very nice brunch in the hotel bar with Dave and Vicky and Kath. And then you had your afternoon session.
Now that was an advanced D&D, the Haunted Bordello.
Yeah.
Which the guy running it, Mitch, I can't remember his surname, Mitch, and it was very much following all the dice and stuff. I struggled a little bit because of how much dice. I probably didn't put myself as far forward because I was worried about which dice I needed to use, which, as I say, is something I need to improve on, get used to more dice, but it was a good game. It was one where people died. It was one of them where if we'd had longer, everybody probably would have died. So many rooms, so many corridors, so many alcoves, loads underground. We never even got to the second level. There was that many places to examine and trapdoors for us to fall through and almost die, stroke die.
Yeah, so it was a classic AD&D game, wasn't it? And AD&D First Edition. I saw you perusing the player's handbook with a wizard on the cover, and they were the first ever role-playing game manuals I ever bought, aged 11 or 12 or 13 by saving up pocket money. And yeah, I mean, in those days we played AD&D, but we ignored 90% of what was in the rule books because it was so dense and esoteric and weird.
I was looking for some extra provisions to buy after we'd got back with loads of gold.
Yeah.
But some of the things I bought, thinking in mind of, like this necklace we'd found, something to put it in, we didn't go back to that bit anyway.
Right.
But, yeah.
But nevertheless, you enjoyed it.
I did.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and my afternoon game was run by Ian, aka Biomassart, and it was a sequel to the Keep book/movie, which was a lot of fun. A combination, a little bit of Where Eagles Dare, a little bit of the Keep, a little bit of World War II intrigue and politics, and finding out about just how complicated 1944 Romania was with coups and counter coups and various other bits and pieces. A little bit of horror. I played, by accident, not by design really, essentially a sniper stroke, soldier with zero social skills, who in my mind looked like probably Oliver Twist era Oliver Reed. So therefore his favourite weapon was an entrenching tool that he'd carved Nancy into the handle. So he never got a chance to use Nancy on any Nazis, sadly. But he did get to shoot a Nazi major in the face with his sniper rifle. So that was nice. And we managed to escape with the booty and with everything and achieve our mission with no deaths, which was nice. So yeah, that was a lot of fun as well, and a little bit different. And Ian, bless him, decided to run a World War II game where we would be you know, in all likelihood, killing Germans set in 1944, and 2 of his players who've signed up for it were German.
He said, and he didn't realise till halfway through.
yeah. So that was interesting. And they're both fluent German speakers, obviously, although they've lived in the UK for, you know, the thick end of 30 years. So yeah, that was good fun. And again, meeting new people from different backgrounds and stuff like that. Yeah, it was excellent.
Well, this is it. My second game. Other than meeting James, who you already knew before it, I didn't know anyone else at that table.
That's the first time I'd ever met James in person. But of course, the first time I'd ever met Dave in person or Vicky in person. We'd met Kath 1.
Yeah.
You know, we've met Clarky a couple of times over the years, obviously, because we went to his 50th birthday in ClarkyCon, which was your previous experience of gaming with strangers.
Oh, we caught up with him in that pub that time.
We
did.
We weren't going to go down the Port Street Beer House for the post GROGMEET booze up, but we thought, you know what, this is your first GROGMEET. This is only my second GROGMEET. It's only a once a year thing. We should make the effort. So we went down there, got arseholed because we hadn't had any tea, and then had a nice stroll back into the gay village. Went to the village chippy in the gay village, stuffed our fair chips, and went back to the hotel. Unfortunately, the hotel bar was closed, so we couldn't have a nightcap, which was probably a good thing to get up and drive home this morning.
That was probably a really good thing, because I think all three of us would have had a nightcap.
Clarky has sent a picture of him and Dirk and a few other folks in the lift at their hotel at 3 a.m. They went back to the hotel and carried on drinking till 3 a.m, which I think would have been slightly beyond me, to be honest, given that we started at the break yesterday. I think we had our first ones at 1:30, didn't we?
Well, he did well, because he said he was up till 2 a.m. the night before as well.
Yeah. I'm afraid that kind of debauchery has passed me.
Oh, me too. I still feel I've had a skinful.
Yeah. One of the interesting things, of course, that happened when we were in the Port Street Beer House is we bumped into Chris Sharp. That was the first time I'd seen Chris since the Moorcock Tolkien weekend that I went to a couple of years ago. And Chris was talking about Owlbear and Wizard Staff, which is another gaming get-together. Not a full con, but a gaming get-together, whatever you want to call it, in Leamington Spa. And going back to 2020, Loz and I were booked onto Owlbear and Wizard Staff, had our hotel booked and everything, but then of course we know what happened in 2020. Owlbear and Wizard Staff got cancelled. But last night you expressed an interest in doing another con. You enjoyed GROGMEET so much, you thought, yes, I'll have a go at Owlbear and Wizard Staff. Well, you can raise your eyebrows now, but last night when you were drunk, you were game for it.
Well, probably because you went and booked it there and then.
Well, no, because I told you after you were game for it, so chicken or egg, which one came first? Well, in which case, the egg. Because you said, yeah, you were game for that. Cass said, yes, she was game for that. So I went online and booked us a hotel at Leamington Spa for the Owlbear and Wizard Staff dates, which I hope don't change, because if they do, we're going for a weekend in Leamington Spa to just do other things. So I guess to enjoy the joys and sights of Leamington Spa. But we'll be doing that in September. Hopefully, we'll also be doing Owlbear and Wizard Staff.
We will see nearer the time.
A successful weekend.
It was. It was a fun weekend.
Yeah.
We got to see a lot of people we knew, some we didn't. Meet new people, and yes, it was a totally enjoyable. Lovely hotel, may I also add. It was quite expensive, but in the middle of Manchester, but worth it.
Yeah, we ended up thinking, right, where is GROGMEET taking place? Oh, it's taking place at Whitworth Lock. Can we stay in Whitworth Lock? Oh, we can stay in Whitworth Lock.
Yeah.
How expensive it is? Oh, it's expensive. But we can be lazy. We can roll out of bed in the morning, have some breakfast, and just walk into the room where the games are taking place.
Yes.
Ideal.
It really was. And it was lovely. And we had some lovely food there as well as drinks. And yeah, great atmosphere.
Yeah, if anybody goes to Whitworth Lock, I recommend the Mank Muffin. Yeah, very delicious.
But also the eggs on sourdough, very nice.
Yeah, a nice wine and beer as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that is the end. That is the conclusion of our GROGMEET 25 reportage.
And I think 10 out of 10.
Yeah, 10 out of 10. Many thanks to Phil and to Andrew for sharing their reflections on GROGMEET and gaming in general. As it happens, Phil's very first ever game of AD&D at our first ever GROGMEET has bagged her a playtester credit for when that scenario is published. Bonza. You can find Andrew on Blue Sky, where he is at transculturalcbt. And Dirk's latest episode features his own reflections on GROGMEET, so check that out over on the Grognard files. At some point soon, perhaps when we've finished the room stuff, it will be time for me to look in more detail at the Hawkmoon RPG, maybe with Dave, rope Dave in there. But that's something for further down the line. So in the meantime, I'll just take time to thank our patrons. First, those without tier, Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster and Sebastian Weetabix, and our Chaos Engineers, Ed Von Stout, Andrew Zicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, all the Andrews, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner-Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Nick Hopkinson, Ofer Ziv, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Scott Butler and Simon Perrins. And of course, thanks to our crafty Jugaderos, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Brian Henderson, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, Graham Holden, Kevin Williams, Liam Toner, Loz, Mark Buckley, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Sean Twist, Toby White, and Taylor Lavery. I should have probably pointed out, Matthew Broom is the man behind the Owl Bear and the Wizard's staff. So, see you in September, Matthew. An eternal thanks to our patron demons, Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andrew Clark, Andy Darby, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Janie Stim, Jason Vogel, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hiapa, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labateau, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tony Malazzo, the OG patron, Norman Beresford, and last but never least, Robert McMillan. Okay, enough of my blather. Don't forget you can follow us on Instagram with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can find me on Blue Sky where I'm Stimbot5000. One day I maybe will try and change that handle to Breakfast Ruins. We'll see. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. BITR Breakfast in the Ruins Radio is live on Radio Garden or via the web player at breakfastintheruinsradio.blogspot.com. We have our Patreon page too, of course, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But until next time, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.